Well, I'm joined now by Jonathan Conricus, a former IDF spokesperson and now Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Watching that report, you must be very concerned. The only functioning hospital left in southern Gaza hit not once but twice within the space of 10 minutes.
Yes, it's definitely not the desired outcome. Killing civilians or having dead civilians and dead journalists is never the intention of the IDF. I think that the Israeli troops were still waiting for a final investigation and for the findings to be made public. But I think what they thought was happening was that Hamas were using cameras on that same building that were observing Israeli troops and posed a risk to Israeli troops, collecting intelligence on troop movement, and therefore ordered the bombs to be fired. I agree, there's a very problematic issue here of the second strike. I struggle to explain it, and I think that that appears to have been the biggest mistake. The first mistake of firing into an area where there was obviously also civilians, I can understand it under the operational considerations that the IDF is under, since Hamas has been abusing hospitals and since we've seen Hamas fighting from within every hospital in Gaza. It makes sense that Israeli troops on the ground would sense that there are Hamas operatives on top of the Nasser hospital as well.
So, I mean, some would, you call it a mistake, and certainly Benjamin Netanyahu has called it a mishap. But that second strike can't have been a mistake, that double tap. That is what many would say a war crime. That's what happened here.
No, I disagree, and I wouldn't want to jump to conclusions without...
no, but firing at medics and genuine journalists
on the ground,
reporting on the
first strike. I would say that it is...
No, how can that possibly happen?
No, I think that when you're always many people are very fast to declare what's a war crime and what isn't, usually when it relates to Israel. However, what I think we should be looking at is intent. And if there was intent to kill aid workers and evacuators and medics, then that is indeed extremely grave. I do not believe that that is the case. And based on what my conversations with IDF people, it was a misidentification and a misunderstanding of the situation on the ground.
Well, Israel has... Sorry to interrupt.
I'll just complete the sentence. Where what was visible on the video that you showed wasn't what was visible to the troops that ordered the strike. That could be one explanation. Obviously insufficient, and the end result is a bad one that mustn't occur again. And civilians and aid workers and journalists should not be harmed on the battlefield. Yeah. There were 6 terrorists that were killed, and that's a good thing. But
I'll get on to the 6 terrorists that were killed in a moment. But in terms of firing at that camera, Israel has some of the most advanced intelligence in the world, some of the most advanced weapons technology in the world. That was a Reuters camera broadcasting live pictures, which it's done for many, many weeks from that rooftop position, broadcast live on television. It's not exactly difficult to know what that camera is being used for, and yet it was struck not once, but twice.
Again, I disagree, and I think that that isn't the case. It's impossible to know
Those are the facts. It was a Reuters camera broadcasting live footage.
Hold on. It is impossible for troops on the ground to know which camera is broadcasting where, and it is a fact that Hamas operatives have been using civilian-looking cameras in order to monitor the troop movement of the IDF and to blow IEDs and to detonate buildings and to cause lots of casualties for Israeli troops by using civilians' surveillance efforts. And the camera looks like a camera. It doesn't matter who is behind it and where the feed goes to. And Israeli troops on the ground have absolutely no way of knowing which feed is going where.
Well,
there wasn't any signs or any flags.
They should be better informed. If you just fire at anybody holding a camera, then what does that say about the...
Well, that isn't accurate either, because it's not anybody holding a camera. There were 6 terrorists there, and they were the ones that were operating camera systems.
Okay, let's talk about those 6
terrorists. The threat about it.
Okay, let's talk about those 6 terrorists. The IDF says 6 of those killed in the strikes were terrorists. You saw the evidence that we have gathered. Omar Abu Tiem, a combatant, but he died elsewhere a day earlier.
Allegedly,
Is the IDF issuing,
according to your partial information.
Let me just finish my question, Jonathan, if you would. Is the IDF issuing names of terrorists already dead to minimise the impact of this strike on the hospital?
No, and I don't know. As you just said before, you just praised IDF intelligence and camera and surveillance capabilities. So let's continue with that line of reasoning. I would suggest that IDF intelligence is indeed far superior to that of Sky News UK. And if the IDF says that that said terrorist was killed, then I believe that that is way more accurate than the intelligence that a Sky reporter reporting out of Jerusalem with stringers in Gaza has access to. But the point being that there was a military target that was struck and that Israeli soldiers on the ground felt that they were threatened. I am very clear about the fact that this is not the result that is anyway the normal standard that Israel should be okay with. This is not okay. These are journalists who shouldn't have been wounded, and the civilian aid workers should not have been killed. Full stop. That needs
okay, well,
to
that
be
6th terrorist, the information came simply from obituaries and footage of his family going through the rubble looking for his body the day before. But let's move on. At least 190 journalists have been killed in Gaza since the war began. That's according to the Committee to Protect Journalists. The aid workers security database, 536 killings of aid and rescue workers. How can Israel ever justify that? Almost 200 journalists, more than 530 aid workers.
Yeah, I think we have to, those are big numbers, and Israel, I think, would do well and to look into each and every name and make a concerted effort to understand who was doing what. I know for certain that Hamas has done a very successful operation, strategic long-term operation, to embed its operatives within the core of so-called journalists or media workers in Gaza. And I think that what we have seen is a systemic effort by Hamas to use the protected emblems of journalism, the vest and the helmet, in order to shield their operatives on the battlefield. Now, that does not mean that every journalist or every person with the vest is a legitimate target, not at all. What I'm saying is that Hamas is actually putting journalists at risk by having their operatives use protected...
Well, you know, there's a very easy solution to that, isn't there? To have independent, international journalists allowed into Gaza. A couple of weeks ago, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the army to allow more foreign journalists access to the Gaza Strip. How many have been allowed in?
As far as I know, that hasn't really materialized yet, and I regret that. I think that's something that needs to happen, and it needs to happen fast and not a day too late. It should happen faster.
Why hasn't it happened?
I didn't make the decision, and I'm on record saying that it should have happened more than a year ago. So I actually agree with you. I think there should be much better access for credible Western journalists that are not under the thumb of Hamas to go in and report from the ground. And I think that's what Israel should have done. And I hope that now Israel will do that, and it will do it faster. And I've actually spoken with officials in the IDF spokesperson unit and at the government level, and I've been saying this in Israeli TV and on international TV. And I think that is what should happen. And I actually agree with what you say. More transparency would be better.
Great. We appreciate you putting that pressure on, and if you could keep doing so, we'd be very grateful. Jonathan Conricus.
Always happy to be of service.
Jonathan Conricus, former IDF spokesman and now FDD Senior Fellow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Dejobnik signing off.